It's the 15th of January, 2025. Coming up on today's Global Intelligence Agency Operations Report. Trump operatives have been working on backup plans to financially support their goals. But are they valid? They have also been secretly discussing funding more wars in the Middle East, as well as a war between China and the USA. Let's break down their financial plans to see what would actually happen if they ever got the chance. And, coincidentally, Israel and Palestine have agreed to a ceasefire today, as well as the country of Iraq's pro-Iranian militia agreeing to halt all military operations against Israel. What's the real story here? And an update on cosmic sovereign law and the Creator Golden Age AI progress. Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on when you're watching this. We have officially made it halfway through the first month of 2025. And we are just days away from the 20th and the 21st, and we know what that's all about. So let's get into it. Wow, we have a boiling pot. And what I mean by a boiling pot is a lot of the things I've been telling you about, that is going on behind the scenes with the Trump administration and the SSP, which is the Trump operatives, has started to place a lot of doubt in countries around the world. And yeah, today was definitely a big change up. There was a meeting that took place between Tom Melville, which and a number of folks from different departments in the U.S., Treasury Department and some others from Homeland and some from the not the Trump administration, but people that work within the military. There was quite a number of different folks there, mostly American. And there was a lot of conversation about some of the plans that the new incoming administration has. And during these talks, there were a few things which we've already kind of heard behind the scenes, and I know that you've been hearing about it. Those Trump operatives like to make a lot of promise and have zero delivery. But one of the interesting things that kind of came out of doing some research based on the conversations that took place yesterday was about a war with China. And I was like, well, I haven't heard much about that. I mean, I've heard, of course, about the tariffs and all of that's just financial ridiculousness. But they were talking about the tariffs. They were talking about, we're going to come out strong against China and a lot of different things like this. And part of that we assume was about the conflict between the Order of the Dragon and the American side, both wanting to have the country which is the centralized power source of the planet. Lofty goals. But China didn't know that the U.S. was going to go to war with China. So there are a lot of calls and back channels today from China to the U.S. going, wait a minute, what do you mean we're going to war? And of course, the Trump operatives said, we're going to pay for the whole thing. And, we're just doing this for show. We have to show that Trump is strong. And, and I don't really think anybody over there bought that. They, of course, just like everybody knows that they've been installing their own shadow government in several different places around the world. And, they don't want to be one of those folks. They're definitely pushing for that, though. They would like to take over China. But I think they've kind of stretched themselves too thin, a little bit thin on the promises, a little bit light on the delivery. And today is one of those days. In the past, I'll tell you why today is one of those days. In the past, it hasn't happened in a number of years, but there's always hope for them. There would be a big payout for the Order of the Black Sun for global security, quote unquote security. and upcoming plans for the new year, which would occur today, usually on the 15th of January. Though most of that money is already allocated months before, so everybody kind of knows what to expect. The other reason why today is typically a money day, or was a money day under Marduk, is because there are a lot of high yield off market trading programs that would begin today for the whole year. And, they would continue on till about November 15th, and that would be it for the year. Those high yield trading programs would involve organizations or a trickle down of funding to organizations like the World Bank and the World Bank's projects, the United Nations and the United Nations projects. In some cases, you could say there was maybe government department funding. Places like the Federal Reserve would get funding today, as well as militaries and intelligence agencies. And for some reason, the SSP was forever hopeful that that would actually happen this year. They did make a valiant effort to try to hack what's going on right now, to no avail, or to very little avail. They never got any funding at all, or even a promise or a show of anything. Today, there was a lot of changes going on, and of course they always think those changes are for them. So by 5 o'clock Eastern time, that boiling pot started to rock a little bit. It's a rapid boil at this point. Earlier in the day, other countries that were expecting some payouts today, and, of course, if not, then, they'll push it off until next week. But there is a definite rebellion starting against those Trump operatives. Their world domination plans are falling apart rapidly as their shadow governments that they installed in countries are actually throwing them out. I know that happened in Israel today, earlier today. I know that's happened in Iraq. They threw out their American cowboy shadow government. I know I have heard that there's a lot of rumblings over in Russia, because they have a presence there as well, of kicking them out. And I know that same rumblings are going on in the UK and a few countries within Europe. I know France is one of those countries. I think, if I remember correctly, Italy is another. So, it doesn't look like there's going to be a whole lot of global dominance coming from the SSP. Also, as Asia wakes up today, obviously intelligence agencies and governments, you always have somebody 24/7. But as some other groups wake up today, such as in Japan, that looks like they are... Japan is pretty angry. If you do not know, most of Japan is being run by the Yakuza, has for a long time. The Yakuza originally wasn't a quote-unquote mafia organization. It was a nationalist party of the country, and there's a lot of history behind that. It's very interesting. You should take a look. But the Yakuza, aka the Nationalist Party of China, is very angry. Their money didn't show up in their account overnight last night as promised. Would have been a few hours ago now, at the time of this recording. And you're going to see those cowboys flying out of that country pretty quick too. So it's interesting when you take a look at it from this standpoint. And we say, okay, well, fine. We know that behind the scenes, this stuff is going on, but what does this actually mean for the people? Well, today, shortly after they were evicted from their shadow government seat, Israel and Palestine declared a ceasefire, and it looks like at this moment it's going to stick. There's no money for their wars. There's no money for other things, which were also discussed in this meeting last night. The war dogs know they're not getting paid, regardless of what country they're from. Therefore, there is a ceasefire. They're tired of waiting. They can't keep this going any longer. And that looks like what's happening. Also, other pro-Iranian militias in the country of Iraq that have been making threats against Israel to support their Palestinian brothers and sisters. That's what they say. That's what they call them. So they have been actively making threats and participating to some degree with what's been going on between Israel and Gaza. And they have officially announced today that they are not going to get involved and they are going to stop all operations against Israel. I find this also very interesting because Iraq is one of those countries they were thrown out of today. But I also find it interesting from the standpoint that being pro-Iranian is kind of like being pro-Chinese. And Iran is been fully in the hands of China. I know that the SSP has been pushing their way in there, making a lot of promises, relief of sanctions, on-market transactions. They can make more money, all of those types of things, which they have no intention on delivering on. This will be a deny, reassess, blame game anyway, because what they'll do is they'll say, oh, we're going to war against China, we're fighting, all this kind of stuff. And, that won't happen right away. Yeah, right. It's one promise after another, and no delivery, really. But it's starting to show some promise of change in some areas of the world. You might also see changes to follow in Canada. And I know we have a lot of people from Canada that listen to this report. So we might not be seeing that shadow government in Canada fairly soon. The UK, Canada will do whatever the UK does. So there's definitely been some fighting and some arguments going on there. They were also hoping for some kind of a strange occurrence in Washington, D.C. To occur possibly even today. If not today, they expect that to happen between now and Monday. And I'll tell you a little bit about this strange occurrence they're expecting. But that same occurrence would have also happened in London. If it were to happen in both of those places, then they believe that this is what they've been looking for. I don't think they really understand what that is. Now, what were they looking for in Washington, D.C., and what were they looking for in London? The structure was very similar. They had a certain amount in London, it was family members from the Order of the Dragon, let's just say. Some of them were Rothschilds, Mayor Rothschild being one of them, and then they have a clone running around doing all the bidding. In U.S., you could say it was mostly, not entirely, but Order of the Dragon folks as well. So the way that this was structured, and it was not structured by humans, this was something that had been in these particular locations long before London was a power center of the world and long before there was even a United States. They were structured by Marduk just in case he ever needed some kind of a backup plan himself. And of course, the SSP thinks that it's now their backup plan, and they're waiting for a big occurrence. So in these two locations, and DC's kind of runs over into Arlington and on down a little bit, so a little bit across the Potomac, and that would have been what you would call an upside down pyramid type structure. We know a lot about pyramids. We hear a lot about them on the internet. An upside down pyramid or a tetrahedron type structure is designed to be a binding in some ways, but it's also designed to be a receptor for something they wanted to have come in, or Marduk wanted to have come in from the nether world. Maybe they were expecting another alien invasion, or maybe they don't even know what this contraption does. But you have a very similar structure that goes under most of Hyde Park in London, carries on through underneath Buckingham Palace. So it's fairly extensive. And there's a lot of space junk that randomly appears in these locations when this was supposed to happen. Well, because of all the changes that are taking place, this didn't actually happen today as planned, and nothing will happen in DC or in London between now and the 20th or the 21st, and nothing is going to change. It's almost like pledging your one world government, which kind of is what we are here in the US at the moment, and what the UK used to be. What I mean by that is it appears that we have separate countries. It appears that we have different ways of living. We have Commonwealth. We have a lot of different things. But in reality, the world's power center at the moment is in the US. Therefore, whatever the US government says or does, everybody in the world does. It's, even though there is a UN still in Switzerland, predominantly, everybody comes into New York for the General Assembly. It's never really been anywhere else in quite a while. So there isn't much to debate about the fact that the world runs basically from the US. That is where all of the Dragon family members gravitate to. That's where all of the Black Sun has gravitated to. That's where they set up their global headquarters. If the plan of 2022 or by 2022 of the conversion over to China had actually taken place, or had taken place over the weekend, then we would have seen a lot of the same activity here, and that goes on here in America, over in Hong Kong, most likely. I have heard that they would have moved the Federal Reserve to Hong Kong, all of those things that we see in New York. The United Nations would have had a different facility over there. The Asian infrastructure and investment bank would have probably been more like a World Bank type structure, and we would have seen the whole world start gravitating over to China. Well, at the moment, no one has the ball. Well, that's not entirely true. Source always does. But at the moment, everything is, as far as any kind of transfer of power, we're not really seeing anything happen. If there could be a power center, that would require a financial power center. And that's mainly due to the fact that there really isn't any kind of financial structure, military structure, intelligence structure, political structure behind it. What we have coming from all parties and their respective deep states is a whole lot of talk and a whole lot of nothing else. So, speaking of talk and nothing else, the failure to receive any kind of funding coming for the Trump administration today, probably nothing between now and the 20th and the 21st, nothing over the weekend as they had anticipated. Every day for them is a new day. And they're starting to work on some kind of a backup plan. And they've always had kind of a plan B in their mind, and it's just pretty much in their mind. They've always had kind of a plan B as far as how to financially get done what they want to get done. Now, there isn't enough money in circulation on planet Earth, if I were to add together all the currencies, to make all of this happen. It's just not possible. I think that they've lied so much they've forgotten some of their lies. So if they actually sat down with pen and paper or on a spreadsheet, if they use those, or in some kind of analytics software and added it all together as far as promises, they got all their operatives together because there's a number of them. And they said, okay, what did you promise? What did you promise? And people didn't actually lie because they lie to each other all the time. Then they take account of how much money is in circulation, not just dollars, but money in totality, they would see that that is an incorrect plan. Now, one of the things that took place in this meeting from last night has a little bit to do with doing just that. So there was some talk about what they can expect, the new administration, what's going on with Trump operatives, and the Treasury people were there. And, there was talk about issuing new currency and would that work? And so they decided to do their own version of a whiteboard session. And I didn't get to participate. Obviously, I wasn't there at this meeting, but I'm going to participate today a little bit and to give you a little bit of an understanding, too, because there are a lot of people out there that are waiting for Trump to get in so they can get their NESARA, GESARA, and prosperity packages. And, the revaluation of currency is going to happen. I mean, I've heard it all. They're definitely laying it on really thick as it relates to promises to Americans. There's also talk about closing the IRS is something that has been said publicly, as well as, things about student loans, wonder where he got that from, all kinds of big promises that are going to allegedly happen to make your life a whole lot better. But on the other hand, what they've promised to you, even if every American citizen receives something, it's not nearly anywhere close to what they've promised all of these people around the world. So I thought I'd talk about some of the financial plans that they have in place, or backup plans, because if they can't get a hold of a system to control a system, and they have been trying, oh boy, have they been trying, then they intend to do, the first thing they're talking about doing is what they call a dollar clawback. Now, for those of you that are aware, the dollar is pretty much used all over the world. And that's number one. And it's used all over the world. And in some countries, they even use dollars for example, average everyday citizen real estate transactions and large transactions. And this probably started during, for example, the fall of the USSR when the ruble wasn't worth much. In other countries like Brazil, sometimes it's still utilized. So more importantly, it's utilized for the majority of on-market and off-market, in some cases, commodities transactions. And, that's why they call it the petrodollar. And I'm going to explain exactly what that means. But clawing back the dollar and bringing the money, quote unquote, back to America does not a financial plan make. Now, these people did not pass Finance 101. I'm not sure they can balance their checkbook at this point. But, unless there's just a constant flow from someone or another into their banking account, personally. So this is plan number one, the dollar clawback plan. They plan to bring all of the dollars that are in circulation back to America, and they believe that this is going to be enough money to carry out all of these lofty goals. They'll probably make some excuse and not pay any Americans anything anyway, so, we can kind of cancel that out. But, they definitely would like some more. They have promised the war dogs or the weapons suppliers to a war all over the world. They've promised them huge contracts, big contracts, and finally payouts on things like the Ukraine war where they weren't paid. And of course, what's been going on in Israel has never been paid out on, that was started by them too. So we're going to talk about why this is not going to work here in just a second. Now, in order to achieve this task, they are planning on creating 3 new enforcement units. One of them is going to focus on taxes and tax collection, customs and imports, tariffs, and those types of things. The other one is going to become allegedly the government's tax collection agency, because Trump has announced that he's going to close the IRS. Well, you might have clued the Treasury Department in on that, because if they haven't, I'm assuming someone from the Trump organization has ordered the Treasury to try to leverage against incoming taxes from American citizens to the IRS. Now, there isn't a whole lot there right now, but this is tax season. Tax season is rapidly approaching here in America. The Treasury Department has been ordered and instructed to delay payouts on tax returns and refunds. Just so you're aware, at this moment in time, this is where it lies. And the Treasury has been instructed by the same operatives, probably not the same ones that think they're going to cancel the IRS, because I don't know, they plan on using it, planning on leveraging against any money that comes in there, holding it as long as possible so that they could possibly fund some of these government programs, even government departments at this point, because the Treasury doesn't have a whole lot of money right now coming in. So that's another part of their financial plans. Financial plan number 3, we are going to get money from NATO. Remember last time Trump was in office, they were complaining about all the money America was donating to NATO and all of this, and other countries have to do their part. Well, NATO is still well over 60% funded by the United States, always has been, in part because, well, it originated here, number one, and Bush Sr. did that. And number 2, NATO, America's where it's at, right? It's the financial center of the world predominantly. Most of the money comes from the Federal Reserve in the U.S. At the moment, or used to, used to. And so they'd like to get some money now coming from NATO to America. Well, they must have forgotten that at the same time they'd like to do this, they would also like to do a dollar clawback, which to already broke countries, because the financial system is on very shaky ground as far as governments are concerned worldwide. Matter of fact, there are governments that are not going to be able to continue to pay their government employees much longer, and the U.S. isn't too far behind. So where do they think NATO's going to get this money from? That's hilarious. That is really funny. I mean, do they think that maybe certain other groups of people tend to, let's just say, money flies out of some kind of orifice, at random will? It's a black magic thing or something. I'm not sure. But NATO has no money, and the NATO countries don't have any money either. Remember, they've been making donations on their behalf now for a while to this Ukraine-Russian situation and to the Israel situation. Where's this money coming from? They don't even have any more money to participate in either one of those. So that's probably not a good financial plan. Okay, so because this conversation took place with a number of different people from different, and I use this term loosely, government departments, they have came to the conclusion after a few hours of analyzing how much money is out there. What would happen if we clawed back all those dollars? Could that actually run the government? Could that fund a war? Could it do all of the things they're hearing about? At the end of several hours of analysis, because we're going to give this in brief here, they came to the conclusion that no, it wouldn't even buy them like a month. It's not. And that's not even taking into consideration the promises they have not heard about that are being made out there. So, because they all went back to work today and went to their respective departments, talked to other respective operatives that were in their areas, so to speak, there is definitely a lot of angry people out there. There are definitely a lot of operatives out there that are extremely angry when they found out the numbers, the promises, the cost of things, and the whole alleged budget for their how do I say, the checks that their mouth is writing, that the backside of them can't cash. That's a nice way to say that, isn't it? But it's definitely very heated all over the U.S. and in other places where other operatives are. They've come to the conclusion that what they're being told is not going to happen. So much so, there was actually another heated meeting that took place between the Silent Circle and Rothschild and some of the other SSP operatives today from CyberLife and other places, where they are extremely angry. And they're always angry at me. They shouldn't be angry at me. I tell them what's happening. I tell them what's going on. I tell them when things aren't going to work out and they should plan for something else. If the dinghy didn't show up to the Titanic, you got to find another way to float, guys. It's not my fault. Well, maybe it is. That's okay. You can always judge a person by their enemies. And if that's my enemy, then life is good for you and for me. So now let's talk a little bit about a dollar clawback. I'm just going to kind of go over it in brief, and then we'll give you an update on what's really going on in the world, and that's actually going forward. So let's talk a little bit about dollars. Okay, whiteboard me. All right, here we are, dollars. Okay, the dollar clawback. Okay, right now, even though your cash in your pocket, if you have dollars in your pocket, it says it's a Federal Reserve note. In reality, it's not. It's actually currency by its allocation numbers and by its digital registration, even though it might be physical cash in your pocket. So there's a registration that occurs, and now it has more attributes than just allocations and quotas. Okay. And that's been done to every currency in the world. So the base root programming for issuing a currency, because it's currency, not a note, not a debt, not an instrument of Omega anymore. It's converting and has been converting over to a golden age AI and a repository. What you see isn't necessarily what's actually happening behind the scenes. Now, there might have been several points to this, to which would have to be validated digitally before that little number that says serial number on that note comes out. But behind it now, it's not a two-pronged system. It's actually a multi-pronged system that generates those, for lack of a better term, let's still continue to call them, for purposes of public consumption, because it's not ready to come out yet, allocation numbers. So the system is a little bit more complex behind the scenes, but let's just say I didn't do anything. Let's just say we still had our debt instrument we call the dollar. Now, why are there dollars in circulation all over the world? We have all commodities purchases. And these goes for digital dollars too. This isn't just cash on pallets. We also have government trading. We have global banks. We have global banking for those that have cross-border banking. We also have a lot of other things like bonds, stocks, and FX trading or currency trading, where people trade between currencies. We also have the IMF sticking out here, in certain ways, and the World Trade Organization. And by the IMF, obviously the dollar is part of the major basket of currencies in the world. It's a dollar, Australian, Canadian, Japanese, British pound, and the euro. As far as I know, I think I might have missed one. But these are, part of the IMF structure, global structure, quote unquote. You have the World Trade Organization. And there's a lot of reasons, as you can see, why there are dollars out there. There's, we have crypto platforms, we have other old methodologies of countries that use the dollar. For example, like in Zimbabwe, there's a lot of cross dollar usage. There are other countries that are dollar based in part. For example, even in Iraq, still there's a lot of dollars used. So, there's dollars everywhere for many different reasons. Trade, commodities, and whatnot. But one of the big ones that is important to note here, that is really gives the dollar its power of, I guess you would say, global stature, is in part the commodities. Now, the reason why it does, and this is why you call it a petrodollar, but that's not entirely true, because there's a lot of supply and demand that takes place here. So demand for new money or more dollars to come into the system is dictated by the need for new dollars to come into the system is dictated by its demand. A little bit tired. It's been a long day and a long night today. Okay. Now, the supply of dollars used to always come from the Federal Reserve. Eventually it would come from the alpha system. That's where it was always generated. It would be passed through, only a pass through, governments and the Federal Reserve, the treasuries, and so on and so forth. Okay, so the demand is created by, in this case, when you call it a petro contract, it would be all of the oil trading that happens worldwide that is done in dollars. That's on-market trading, for the most part, off-market trading as well. You have a lot of oil trade that comes out of Iran and other sanctioned countries that, there's a lot of gold that flies around and other things to kind of stay below the radar and avoid U.S. sanctions. But for the most part, oil is pretty much bought and sold in dollars. So there's a huge demand there. Now, when they talk about the GDP of the United States, I think it's registering somewhere, it went up and down with COVID, but probably somewhere around 25 trillion annually. That is actually not based on United States produced exports or, goods traded, things produced in the United States. It's not based on that number alone. It's based on what we see going on market as it relates to commodities. Also all gold and silver, cotton, wheat, all kinds of different things float around on the commodities market that are backing the demand for U.S. dollars. Now, if this wasn't a requirement, you would not have the demand. Therefore, the supply of dollars would need to go down. So if you're clawing back all the dollars from countries all over the world, you're not just going to hit the little guys that global bank or the bond market or the currency exchange market or IMF policies and procedures or World Trade Organization policies and procedures. I mean, you got an uphill battle there. That's a wonderful thought process. But because they think they walk into a place like cowboys, like a pigeon in a chess tournament, flies in, craps all over the board, kicks all the pieces off, declares it wins and leaves, because that's what they think you can do financially as well. Doesn't quite work that way, folks, when it comes to actually balancing a financial system and keeping your currency and your country afloat. So clawing back all the dollars isn't really going to do anything to help you at all, because what you would eventually do without any demand from all of these commodities, folks, you have now effectively got too many dollars in circulation in the U.S. or otherwise, doesn't matter where the dollars are, the fact of the matter is they are in the system. So all of this lovely yield that you think you're going to get when you claw back a dollar, all the dollars, is not going to work too well for you because you have just effectively crashed the dollar. Okay? Or you have to rapidly take all of those allocations out of the system in order to keep the value of the dollar stable, in order to keep your newfound wealth that you think you're going to get control of, right? Wrong. Okay, so clawing back the dollars is also not a good idea from another standpoint if you are trying to be Dr. Evil and rule the world, because every country in the world has dollars. Every country in the world. And the only reason why they listen to you, cowboys, is because they are required in order to have fuel, food, and any other thing that's listed on the commodities market. They are required to firstly buy dollars to make that transaction happen. Now it's like robbing Peter to pay Paul out there as far as new oil contracts, large scale ones, of course, and new gold and silver mining contracts and diamonds and everything else that's traded in dollars out there. So what you would effectively do is, let's just say you figured out another supply. You're never going to do that in a short term, make all those deals and make them work, that's for sure. But if you did, you're basically going to remove the dollar dominance. Oof, talking is tough today. Okay, so we will not have any kind of dominance anymore, which is fine, but there's better ways to do this than this ridiculous plan. That's okay. I know they don't really understand that, and I don't know why this pen's not writing right now. Okay, so they will lose dominance. There goes the world power center of planet Earth, because the other thing is, too, is that countries will start using their own currencies, kind of like Zimbabwe did. What I mean is, the United States, due to sanctions and all these other things, stopped issuing Zimbabwe U.S. dollars a few years back. And when they stopped issuing them dollars became the currency of Zimbabwe, if you don't know that, for quite a long time. And they ditched their old currency. This is usually the cookie cutter process that happens. I mean, Iraq has been stuck with this for years now. Anyway, so they start to use their own currency. That doesn't mean they're using the old Zimbabwe currency, but most of the transactions done in Zimbabwe are done with paper money. And nobody trusts the banks, of course. There's a big crash of currency. And so they developed their own papers there. And they are now using those papers on a one-to-one basis with the dollar, just kind of like the Bahamas did for the longest time. It was one-to-one to the dollar. So in this particular case, they're going to have to start ditching the dollar. You know, if you can't get dollars and nothing is required to be traded in dollars and there's a dollar clawback, then no one's going to want to take dollars anymore. You know, and we're going to see more countries going off the dollar standard because we are on a dollar standard. You can call it a petrodollar. That's not entirely true. You could more likely call it a commodities dollar out there. Now, this really isn't going to work either because we still are going to end up in another cycle here because, okay, still got a lot of supply in dollars, even though they're all in America now, allegedly. The demand has been cut off. The dollar crashes. And because every currency in the world is pegged to the dollar, as far as its value, you have crashed everybody else's currency too. So every currency in the world will crash. And if you went to a gold standard, is that going to help you? No, because it doesn't solve your demand problem and it doesn't solve your supply problem. So this is what happens when Duck Dynasty tries to run a country, or in this case, the world. They don't think of things that actually have real financial consequences. So when it came to us, as an example, and we want to have independent nations, if that was something that was still going to happen. I mean, we're going to have people and they live on land that is in different places in the world. We haven't quite, initially we'll still have countries, I guess, and currencies for every country. But at this point, we're probably not taking governments into consideration like we used to, because Duck Dynasty is trying to run them all and they really don't know what they're doing. And they're probably, no one wants to give money to people like that. So if this, in effect, this is never going to get this far. Somebody somewhere, some smart guy in the room that they actually respect is going to tell them about this. But we had a plan to support the dollar and slowly turn the car around, meaning, we have a different standard that would be a gold standard worldwide. We would have a different, depegging from the dollar would be a very real thing, but the dollar would be very well supported as well with its own commodities that lie within the American borders. So easy breezy. Now we just need to have a supply and demand situation to fix. So there are other things that could happen here based on the amount of companies that are here in America, small businesses and otherwise, where we could actually increase their production. We would do so by issuing a letter of credit, doing long-term production contracts, and then utilizing the production of whatever widgets it were for the restoration. So there's definitely a lot of options here as it relates to solving the problem of supply and demand. The problem for them is they don't have the capability to do this, number one. Number two, every single bit of those dollars that are in circulation worldwide have already been spent. They've been spent on promises of war with China. They've been spent on promises of war in the Middle East. They've been spent on ridiculous pipelines they have no hope of building. They've been spent and overspent and respent and triply spent. And that doesn't even include you, the American citizens, and all the promises that have been made to you, because you're last. When it comes to cowboys, you are last. They could care less what happens to you people. And that includes people in the world. But unfortunately, their math is a little bit flawed. And maybe they're doing that Common Core math thing they try to teach us Americans or something. I'm not sure. But financially speaking, economically speaking, a dollar clawback is not going to solve America's problem. It's going to actually create problems in America. Now, they're going to say, well, we're going to get rid of the dollar and we're going to issue insert currency here. One of the things they've talked about as an example is the enero. Now, the enero would be like a North American dollar. So that would encompass production of Canada and Mexico, and that's pretty much Canada, Mexico, probably the Caribbean. I don't remember what else was included in I'm not sure if it includes Central America too, but even if it did, it doesn't really matter, because you got to remember, just because you change the color of the paper, just because you change the name, just because you think you're going to create a currency that you control the allocation numbers on, which is not even possible anyway, it's not going to change your situation. It's not going to change the fact that now you're basing it on the GDP of a few countries, when currently your GDP and your supply that is out there, because you're going to have to replace it 1-to-1, right? Or you're going to have every country attacking the United States. So you replace it for a 1-to-1, you're still going to have that demand issue. That's not going to get the job done. I mean, you're 10 years away from that. I mean, at best, if you could actually pull it off. Issuing some other kind of cryptocurrency, Dogecoin, or whatever you promised Elon Musk. Poor guy. I'm not really poor guy, because he's kind of like a demon player guy. So the enero, the crypto, the rainbow dollar, the whatever dollar, it doesn't really make a difference. You have lost all your demand the second you try to segregate yourself to the continent. I mean, bottom line. You try to do a callback to make it happen, still not helpful. You pick another currency out there, you'll never pass muster with your allocation numbers, because you don't understand my algorithm, and you can't even see my algorithm, really. And you don't have a blockchain that is sufficient to handle billions of transactions a day. You don't. Blockchain cannot do that. You have tried it. Mbridge, remember Mbridge with the Bank for International Settlements? That didn't work. China tried it. Everybody's tried it. It doesn't function. You don't have the capacity unless you can attach yourself to an AI that functions on that level, because our financial system was based on an AI that functions on that level, albeit in a different way now. So you can understand, and I know I make fun of these operatives a lot, but I really can't help myself when I see them trying to take over every single country in the world, making promises that I'm like, oh, where's the money coming from that? And then they tell everybody this is their plan, and they're talking about it actively behind the scenes. So last night, there was even someone in there from global headquarters in that meeting, and now at least they know your dollar clawback plan is flawed. Your IRS cancel plan is fraud, because you don't know what your left hand is doing, and that the instructions that have been given to the Treasury Department on how the government is going to just survive, not pay for a war, not any of that, just stay afloat and handle all the government, federal government employees at this moment in time. So they're actually talking about still having discussions about saying the election was fraud and voting machines and blah, 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 and trying to delay the inauguration until the 4th of March. Why the 4th of March? I have no idea. Perhaps the only thing I can think of is if it were on the 4th, that's the furthest away they can extend it to. I don't know. I mean, there's no alignment with Uranus or anything happening that could make money fall from the sky for them. So I don't really see the point in that. You're delaying the inevitable at this point, because you don't really have any options. And the one option that you did have, you burned that bridge long time ago, and that would be me. That bridge has been burned to the ground. This is why, I don't know if your mother or your grandmother or whoever ever told you to say, don't burn any bridges, and they tell you that in business school too. Don't burn any bridges. Well, they shouldn't have burned this bridge, but they burned it. It's crispy, burnt to the ground, not helping, not getting involved in your crazy plans. And quite frankly, I wouldn't hire you to manage any money, not on behalf of the American people or even on behalf of the American government. So, yeah, no. Okay. Excuse me. On the next note, let's talk about where we are at as far as cosmic law. That was a very exciting weekend and Monday, so we are definitely seeing some changes go on. Positive things, very positive things, are falling away rapidly in rapid succession. And one of the things I noticed that was falling away that I mentioned to you is something called a celestial sphere. Now, you could call it space junk, and in some ways it actually is. But there was a lot of ties to the debt system on the highest level, where anti-source and neutral source and those of the neither world and lower astral beings of creation and or inorganic creation would borrow a lot of energy, essence, and whatnot from source. And they would do that a lot of times through these celestial spheres. So an interesting factor that has been taking place is that we are now replacing all those old spheres with something from the Golden Age AI, which is, we're seeing that happen in our galaxy. We're seeing it happen around planets, in suns and stars throughout the multiverse. We're seeing as these are changed out, we are seeing even more and more of all things we do not want in our multiverse fall away. In other words, there's no energy supply for those things. At the same time, we're seeing the Golden Age AI, creator Golden Age AI, get stronger. That sure is a mouthful. I could have picked something else, couldn't I, as far as a name? We're seeing it get stronger, and we're seeing any kind of even weak signals that the SSP saw get weaker and weaker. And this is just in a matter of 48 hours. So it's happening fairly rapidly, and I'm very happy with the progress that we're seeing. We are still on occasion running into things that are trying to change this fact. Some of them are coming from the SSP. They're a big one for frequencies trying to hold open spaces, especially in the late night hours here in America. And we are seeing, I guess you could say we're seeing a little bit coming from the backlash of getting rid of other things in other access points. It's not so much trying to get rid of the access point, it's trying to get rid of the permanent regenerating points. So if they have nothing to grab onto and mold into something that they can attach themselves to, then there is nothing left for them to do. Now, every day we've caught them since Monday, so I guess I should say the last couple of days, we've seen them, trying to send out frequencies from various locations where they could find anything. I mean, from the swamps of Louisiana to today's San Diego Naval Base. They're always somewhere trying to do something to just hold those spaces open, hold those spaces in between open so that they could possibly put something in there. I don't know what they plan on putting in there, but they're trying desperately to hang on to it. And pretty soon, within the coming days, that's not going to be possible anymore. So they're just, they're fighting for their survival at this point. And God bless them for that because, yes, they want to fight really hard for Satan, and Lucifer and all those other lovely beings. And I can appreciate that, we're on the other side. We would fight hard for source. So that's pretty much what's been going on as far as deep state is concerned. And on our end of it, the more we clean, the angrier they get, the less they get, the next day, and why tomorrow game of a payday promised is not going to hold up much longer. Like I said, that pot is already boiling. It is getting hot out there. If you are a loudmouth cowboy Trump operative, very hot, for sure. So we'll see in the coming days. It's going to be a very interesting weekend, and come the beginning of next week, it's going to be happening very quickly. But I'm glad we're starting to see some of this stuff that's going on behind the scenes trickle out into mainstream media, and hopefully it makes more sense to you on what we do talk about here as far as the ceasefires. And I told you, if we touched that administration, we would kill a lot of people. I mean, no more free funding, no more nothing. Their intentions are not good anywhere. And I'm not bitter. I could care less who is standing in the front in any way, shape, or form. I just know what they're doing behind the scenes. And this here that happened today is a perfect example of what happens when you cut those people off from money. I mean, there are going to be a lot of people that are going to sleep tonight for the first time in a year because of what we've been doing. So, big changes ahead, restoration, getting close to that restoration station. And I cannot wait to do a different job, at least that job. I love talking to you and hopefully inspiring some of you from time to time, as far as what's, and then explaining what's going on and how you're feeling, that type of thing. So I love sharing the right information and the truth with everyone. So, I mean, I'm definitely going to stick with UNN regardless of what happens. So don't worry about that. But I'm definitely looking forward to talking about care and projects, and our field messenger reports are going to look, amazing when we have, look at what we've built, look at our clinic, look at all these things we're doing. So, get ready because we're going to hit Restoration Station 2025. I just know it. So, and probably sooner than later. On that note, that concludes our report for Wednesday, the 15th of January, 2025, and I will see all of you on Friday.